Okay, so on your high-res file, we're going to switch things up and go to skinning. We could hide you could skin multiple skin clusters to one mesh. So if your character has multiple pieces, you could skin like a bunch of them, but you want to work on one skin cluster at a time. If you got stuff on top of, like clothes on top of them, just make a layer. I'm just gonna call this clothes, and just skin this because we could copy the weight information from here to here after we finish.
Does the mesh have to be really similar for that to work, or does it not matter?
It usually doesn't matter as long as the general rule is that the density of this can't be less than the density of this.
Oh, okay.
So as long as it's like the poly count is the same or higher, you won't get any intersection. Like if this was too low res and you copied weights from this, there wouldn't be enough edges to actually match the weight so it would intersect. But okay, the other thing we need to make sure is, like, if you're working on a character that just is in pieces, you could skin all the pieces at once. Like, it's not, you can skin them however order you want them to. But now, what I also want to do is take the skeleton, and let me just set my display here. Okay, take the skeleton here, and I want to do a couple things. I want to prefix this. So I'm going to go and prefix this entire skeleton, just so I call it like skin. Just so that, you know, when we do reference the file, there won't be any name conflicts. This one will say skin, and then our reference one will be the rig one. You could prefix the reference, the rig one too, as rig underscore if you want. Okay, and then what I like to do is select the root joint and do a edit select hierarchy, and then just like decrease the radius on all of them slightly so that when we do reference them, the joints won't be on top of each other. We can see that one is slightly bigger than the other. So when we connect the two, it'll be okay. So the process of skinning, and this I recommend everybody follow this simple example just to get the feel for it. The process of skinning, we're just going to create a cylinder. I'm going to make this pretty low poly. And I'm just going to draw a set of joints. Yeah, that's too much. Okay. Place this in the middle. So when you add a skin cluster to any geometrical object, you got to first make sure that there's no history in that object. So I delete by type history, and then also that the object that you're skinning doesn't have any transforms. So I'll freeze transforms on them. No transforms and no history. And so you select the root of your skeleton, and then you shift select the geometry that you want to skin. And it's under skin, bind skin, smooth bind. Now, I want to talk about the options here. So, but the bind method we're going to use is joint hierarchy. In certain cases, we're going to use selected joints. Selected joints means that it's only going to bind to whatever you have selected. So if I shift selected just these three joints and I had selected joints, it'll bind to just those selected joints. The selected joints method is useful for things like, say, this hair piece there, where you don't really want to bind it to the whole skeleton. I mean, you can and just weight paint it. That's fine too. It just makes that list a little bit smaller.
The selected joints, how I'm going to do mine, being is that only the top half of mine's organic?
What do you mean?
Bind the whole thing.
You could still bind like the whole thing, yeah.
Okay.
Like even if you did bind the whole thing, you could still later on have Maya determine that these don't have influences.
Gotcha.
Okay, so we're going to use joint hierarchy. I'm going to select the the root and then shift select the cylinder. We use joint hierarchy. Max influence, that number means per given vertex, so per given one of these vertex, how many bones can affect it. So I usually go with 4 is pretty good. If your polygon count is fairly low, that means that the vertex distance is really wide and it's going to get affected by way more joints. So usually if like 4 is a pretty good number to start with, but we could still change this later down the line. But in the beginning, I just want everybody to use 4. But that's what that means. Maximum influence is how many bones or how many joints can affect this single vertex. So we're going to make sure we uncheck maintain maximum influences. This gives us the ability to change the influence number later in case we found out it's either too much or too little. Drop-off rate we don't have to worry about. And then please uncheck colorized skeleton because I cannot see the thing. So, so select the root joint, shift select the cylinder, have all this set, and then we're going to hit apply, and then it adds a skin cluster. So if we look at this and we start rotating the joints, we can now get deformation. But usually the default weighting is not very good in Maya. So the way that you begin associating the weights to this is you select the geometry and we'll double click the weight painting tool and you'll get a list over here that basically says all the influences. White means that whatever joint you have selected, so joint 1 here, white means that those vertexes are 100% affected by that joint. Black means they're not affected by it, and gray is everything in between. So the process of doing this is we don't want Maya to do this weighting for us. See, like what happens when I go to joint 3? See how we don't really have a white? We have kind of like a gray. That means that this weighting is too smooth. So it's like the weights are distributed too far, and you're not going to get the best deformed that way. So the process of weighting is like, it's kind of like having 2 glasses of water, but the water in each of the glasses, the amount of water that you have in this is exactly the same. So if you pour a glass out of one water to the other one, it's adding to the second glass, but then it's taking away from the glass that you poured water from. And the volume of water doesn't change. They're just moving them around from different points. So weighting is like that, where the value always adds up to 1 per joint. So like this, if I painted this to 1, that means if I go to like say joint 2, I just took away influence from that. Then alternately, if I painted back the influence to 2 and I went back to 1, now that's like, I went back to 3. So say I'm counterbalancing between 3 and 2. Go back to 3, paint that to 3, go back to 2, now that's black. I paint that to 1, go back to 3, now that's black. Because the vertexes can only add 1 influence.